And Luke grew up in Sandpoint, Idaho. He holds a PhD in political science from Yale University and has taught civics, political philosophy at Columbia University, American University, and Boise State University Honors College. He has written about ideas of America's founding fathers, including a book on President John Adams. And in 2017, he co-founded Reclaim Idaho, a grassroots organization that spearheaded Idaho's ballot initiative to expand Medicaid coverage to 90,000 Idahoans. And now that's under attack, but great work that they've done. In 2021, Reclaim Idaho won a landmark case in Idaho Supreme Court that enshrined the ballot initiative process as a fundamental right in the state of Idaho. In 2022, the organization led a campaign that successfully pressured Idaho lawmakers to make historic investments in Idaho K-12 education. In the years since, Reclaim Idaho has worked to promote affordable health care, ballot initiative rights, common sense electoral reform, and strong public schools. Our next panel member is Sally Toon, and we'll give them all a big hand when they come up here, but our next participant is Representative Sally Toon. Sally's an Idaho native and has lived in Idaho her entire life. She's, having lived in both northern and southern Idaho, she has the ability to say that she understands the issues of the state of Idaho. And I've had the pleasure of getting to work with Sally, and I can attest to that. She is so knowledgeable about things throughout Idaho. She currently lives in Gooding, is a retired high school math teacher with 37 years experience in the classroom, including working at the College of Southern Idaho. Sally and her husband Mark own and operate family farms and cattle ranches in Gooding and Camas counties. Their two sons have returned to Idaho to raise their children and to continue the family agricultural business. She won her first term in the Idaho legislature in 2016 and worked to be a champion of education and the voice for rural Idaho and our working families. In 2022, along with Fred Cornforth, she helped establish the Idaho Democratic Party's Rural Caucus. She has a passion for the issues that come down Idaho's many dirt roads. She's currently the chair of Legislative District 24, as well as the Idaho Democratic Party's Rural Caucus chair. Okay, so welcome, Sally. Our third panel member is former Representative Leon Smith. And I found out just this evening that Leon graduated from Larned High School in Larned, Kansas. And I had the opportunity, my wife and I had the opportunity of living in western Kansas for a few years and met a lot of wonderful people there. And so it's just natural to know that Leon, I understand why Leon's such a great guy. But Leon received his bachelor's degree from Kansas State University and then his Juris Doctorate from Washburn University in Topeka in 1966. He has held several political offices, including prosecuting attorney for Twin Falls County from 1970 to 72. He served 2 terms as a city councilman for the city of Twin Falls from 1974 to 1978, and then he also served as the mayor of Twin Falls from 1978 to 1980. And then from 1998 to 2012, Leon was a member of the Idaho State Legislature. He was the Idaho State Representative and served those years in the legislature. He's also been involved with many civic and community organizations and also has served on statewide boards like the Idaho Transportation Board and other task forces. And so with that, please welcome Luke Mayville, Sally Toon, and Leon Smith. Why don't you guys come on up? Okay, so while they're coming up, I'm going to share some ground rules here, I guess, for this event. First and foremost, this is we're all civil people. We're all going to behave civilly, and see how civil we are. But our rules of engagement are courtesy, civility, and kindness, okay? And, I'm sure they all expect questions that may be challenging, but that's fine, as long as they're civil questions and with decency kept in mind. And I don't even want to say this, but I will say that if for some reason, anything, at any time this gets out of hand, this meeting will end, this town hall will end, and that will be that. So, and I also wanted to, Bob Soika is going to take this wireless mic so that people can hear any questions that you may have. He's going to run around here. He said he could get across the room faster than anybody in here. So he's going to move around the room with the microphone to allow people to ask questions. So please raise your hand. And then also when you ask, whoever's asking a question, we do ask that you just introduce yourself. Just tell us your name and where you're from, and that's it. Okay, so before this event a few days ago, I put together a short list of some things, some topics that they might expect, and just to kind of give them a heads up. But like I said, it's you can. I'm not going to restrict you on any questions that you ask. So you're welcome to ask other questions. But I wanted to cover some topics like their views of the current state of our legislative session, the influence of the far right in our legislature. And then also maybe a peek at the future of politics in Idaho. Where's Idaho headed? And then some maybe a little more specific top questions along the lines of the impact of school vouchers on public education, the impact of Medicaid reform on Idahoans who use Medicaid, as well as the impact of Medicaid reform on the healthcare system. And then I also mentioned there could be questions about the future of ballot initiatives, the future of the abortion ban, and also, and one question that I didn't include with them, what I sent to them, is do you have any advice for any legislative candidates? Because I'm hoping that there are some people out here who are thinking about, maybe I'd make a run for the legislature or even a city council seat, or whatever city that you live in. So with that, I want to, I'm going to just let this mic pass but first, if each one of you would just give us a little feel about, how you see the current legislative session and where it's headed and what might happen.
Thanks so much, Don. I'll just give a really quick overview of the three main issues that our organization, Reclaim Idaho, has been working on. And I want to frame it as really three reasons not to give up if you're feeling that temptation right now, because there are good reasons not to give up right now. The first one has to do with the ballot initiative process in Idaho. One of the darkest moments for me personally in the last 7 years that I've been involved in Idaho politics since coming back to the state where I grew up and getting engaged was back in November and on election night. And not for me, it wasn't mainly because of the news nationally. It was mainly because so many of us had poured our hearts and souls into this effort to reform Idaho's election system. And somewhere in the final weeks of that effort, it really broke pretty clearly along party lines. And we weren't able to really overcome that partisan divide, and in spite of all the really hard work to bring people together across party lines and a great deal of progress we had made. So that was a very bleak election night for me. But one thing that made it even scarier, or even bleaker in a way, was that the election night party of the people who were opposing the proposition that we had worked on, they were celebrating it deservedly. They beat us. But they stood up at that election night party and said, not only did we win tonight by defeating this proposition, we're going to make sure that no ballot initiative ever comes to the state again. We're going to go after the ballot initiative process so that Idaho citizens can no longer put things on the ballot. And over the last 4 months, they've tried really hard to do that. Three major pieces of legislation were proposed to take away the right of Idaho citizens to put things on the ballot. One reason not to give up and to have hope is that 5 months after election night, the ballot initiative process is still intact in Idaho. All three of those proposals failed in the legislature. And that was in large part because so many people, probably many of you here tonight, got engaged in the work of defending the ballot initiative process. And we can talk more about the future of that work if you're interested. I'll just mention two other things really quickly. Medicaid expansion, which is the product of a ballot initiative that we ran back in 2018. It covers 90,000 people with health care, often life-saving health care. That program, believe it or not, because there's a lot of kind of, ideas out there about this, that program is still fully intact. It's still fully intact. And there were two bills this legislative session that attempted to totally repeal it and take away health care from all 90,000 people who benefit from it. There's currently a federal effort to end Medicaid expansion in every state and take away health care from millions of people. And we could talk more about that if you're interested, and we have to be engaged in that fight. But here at the state level, both of the two attempts to repeal Medicaid expansion failed. One of them failed very narrowly. It almost got all the way through. But again, thanks to many people here and all around the state who stood up for Medicaid expansion, it's still intact. Now there was a third bill that went all the way through and passed, and that does threaten Medicaid expansion. And we can talk more about this. This is the one you might have heard about that includes something called work requirements. And there's a danger that it will take away health care from tens of thousands of people, not for the reason you think, not because they're not working. What we know from other states when they tried to do these work requirements, they didn't take away health care from people because they weren't working. They took away health care from working people who didn't fill out the paperwork correctly to show that they were working. So we call these, they're not really work requirements because they don't move people into the workforce. What they actually do is create complicated, burdensome paperwork that people have to fill out every month to keep their health care. And then when people working ag jobs or people who are, busy 24 hours a day and have really hard lives don't manage to get on the internet once every month and fill out the form, they lose their health care. So that bill passed through the legislature. The governor signed it. But here's the good news. In order for these so-called work requirements to go into effect, they have to get approved by the federal government. And you might be thinking, oh, well, wouldn't the current federal government approve of them? Not necessarily. In 2019, the Idaho legislature passed a really similar bill, and it did not get approved by the former Trump administration. So this new bill that the governor just signed with work requirements, it might not even get approved by the federal government. The reason is because the federal government might understand that if they approve the work requirements, they'll get struck down by a federal court. And so think about this, even if the work requirements do get approved by the federal government, they're likely to get struck down by a federal court. I say all that as a way of saying, don't get too discouraged by this recent bill that passed, because the truth is Medicaid expansion is still fully intact. just like you wanted it to be when you voted for it in 2018. It's still there. It's still benefiting people. The last thing I'll say, and I'll keep this really short, the fight against school vouchers is not over. House Bill 93 passed. It created this first school voucher program in Idaho history for the very first time, taking public tax dollars and using public money that we all pay in taxes and using it to subsidize private school tuition for private school families for the first time in Idaho history. That passed. But here's what you need to know. It's not over because the bill that passed has a $50 million cap. We can predict with almost 100% certainty that in the 2026 legislative session, 9 months from now, they're going to try to lift that cap and turn it into a $400 million a year program that's available to every private school family in the state, no matter how wealthy they are. Your tax dollars going to subsidize tuition for wealthy families to the tune of $400 million a year that has to come from somewhere, and a whole lot of it's going to come straight out of public education. So if you think the $50 million voucher program is bad, you're really not going to like the $400 million one. And the good news is we've got a chance to defeat that one. Because after the governor signed the House Bill 93 to enact the first school voucher law, a public records request revealed that 37,000 people contacted the governor's office in advance of that bill, more than any bill in all of Idaho history by far. And of that 37,000, 32,000 told him to veto it. 32,000 out of 37,000, he still signed it. There is a lot more anger and concern and awareness coming out of the fight over House Bill 93 than there was coming into it. So we have an extraordinary opportunity now to channel that awareness, channel that anger into engagement on the issue. Get more people paying attention, get more people involved. So when the $400 million bill comes up in 2026, we can defeat it. And what a lot of people will tell you who have watched all the other states is they'll say, once they get a small voucher bill, it's inevitable that they'll lift the cap, extend it to everyone, and have a huge voucher bill. It's inevitable. Well, what I will tell you, what I believe, it's inevitable that they will try. It is not inevitable that they will succeed. And that's really up to you and up to people all across the state to really get engaged and make sure that this very dangerous voucher bill that already passed doesn't become a wrecking ball that is aimed directly at our public education system. So I'm excited to talk more about that once we get to some question and answer. Thank you, everyone.
Boy, isn't it nice to have somebody like Luke on the panel with you?
Yeah.
Direct all of your hard questions to Luke. Well, I'm up here as your token Republican tonight. And I suspect that if I'm not the only Republican that's a registered Republican here in the state, I may be close to it in this group. And that's a strange feeling for a Republican in Idaho. Oh, do I have another one over there? Okay. But I've, excuse me, I've been in an elective or appointed Republican seat for probably over a quarter of a century. And so I got very accustomed to it. But I was in the legislature for 14 years during good years, before Sally got up there. And those were years when we had across the aisle conversations, and where on Thursday night you'd go out with a group that was Republican, Democrat, it didn't matter. We liked each other, and we could work across the aisle. And that is so different. The last 2 or 3 years of my term, when I was in the legislature, was starting to change. The group was forming, and I don't know what they called themselves at that time, but it later turned into what we now have referred to as the far right or the right wing. I call them wing nuts, but you can call them whatever you want. But it started to change in our caucus. Down at the end of the caucus where the microphone was, we started having guys that would oppose everybody else for some reason, or bring legislation that it wasn't really party legislation or anything else. It was special legislation for their ideology, I guess is the best way to put it. But that group started growing, and by the time I got out of there, I was happy to get out. Things were really changing quickly. But I do want to say one thing that I probably share with all of you. I have never voted for Trump. And that's... I figured that would make me more popular here. I don't know. Don gave us some subjects here that I probably ought to wait until the question and answer. But for background, our Republican delegation, which consists of 2 representatives and 2 senators, all back in Washington now, were all in the legislature when I was there. So I knew them all. And I can tell you that they were totally different people than they appear to be now. I don't understand it. And maybe somebody else can explain it to me, why these guys have changed so much, and they all put out the same information. Oh, this is something that's going to hurt a little bit right now, but you'll be happy with it when we get it all done. Well, things are getting torn apart, and they don't look like they're going to be replaced the way they are now, and there's a plan that seems to be followed, which is called 2025, and it just looks to me like we're headed down a very bad course, and I'm hoping that my party can get a grip on itself and do something that's going to be helpful to stop this train. And I'm going to pass this on to Sally, and we can answer questions later.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. As you heard from my bio, I'm an educator here in Idaho. I was born up in St. Mary's, Idaho, which is clear up in the timber in Luke's part of the world. Yeah, Paul Bunyan area. And down here, Idaho graduate in education. I devoted my life. It's a passion to be a teacher. Absolutely loved every minute of it. It's different today than it was back when I started in 1979, but it was about the kids and the educational process. And and I will say it, I got involved in the politics side of it when then Governor Risch, who was there for 6 months, turned our educational funding upside down. He took a 3-legged stool and made it 2. It doesn't stay up very well, and said, oh, I gave you a tax break. No, you just put it back on the counties. So the counties added another layer of taxes because we didn't get it from the state. And then we went into the Luna laws, worked very, very hard, for lack of a better word, worked very, very hard to get those turned around. Referendum process. After really lame brain arguments to pass these laws. It's like, how do you see that's happening in our classroom? Laws are being made by people that have no idea what's going on in our classrooms. They've pictured every one of us teachers as horrible people that beat kids, pedophiles. I mean, that's not who teachers are. And so when I left the classroom, in 2014, came to CSI, proceeded to work for CSI for a couple more years, and then said, I still have a voice, I gotta do something, and ran for the legislature as a Democrat. I could not put an R behind my name after what they had done to public education. I mean, I was unaffiliated for the most part. I always voted for the person based on their stance on things. I took a stand and said, I will not put an R behind my name in this district because of what you did to public education. Lo and behold, I was elected. Greatest experience of my life, but I do need to say the first week I was in the legislature, day 3, we had a call of the House, and they've threatened it a couple times. Our representative keeps saying a call of the House. They don't do a call of the House very much, but what you do is they lock the doors. You are locked in there for a debate. They're locked from the outside. Pray to God nobody starts a fire. And you have to be in your seat. You're not allowed to leave. This was on day 3, and I'm going, what have I gotten myself into? And that was my first eye-opening experience, that there were people elected that said it's my way or the highway. I don't care what you say. Whoa, can't we have a conversation? And they would just point blank say no. That across the aisle wasn't happening. Let's have a conversation. Let's find the compromise. I'm a teacher. That's what we teach kids. And there were people then in 2016 that didn't feel that way. It was their way or the highway. And as we fought for bills, we managed to keep vouchers out for all 6 years I was there, in-house education. We were able to keep funding. I sat on JFACT, which is the funding mechanism for the state, fighting for every penny we got because they truly wanted to do away with literally every line item in education. And when you look at the state budget, there are like 40 line items, reading programs, math programs. Do you have any idea? Food programs for kids. And those programs are what keep our rural communities going. Have you ever been in a rural school? We don't necessarily have choice. If you're in some of our little rural towns, that's the livelihood of our communities. And if we don't start paying attention and being louder, we're going to lose them too, because the funding just isn't there. We've somehow decided that these schools aren't needed. We can do it online. If COVID didn't teach us anything else, and it was a horrible time, whatever, I represented District 26, where supposedly it started in the state of Idaho, every day in the governor's office. COVID taught us that people are important. Taught us that we're not going to be replaced by computers. It's about our neighbors, and we need to start talking that way. It's about neighbors and listening to each other and helping each other out. We may not have ideally the best, match our ideology, but it's about that conversation. You know what? Medicaid expansion. We have to talk about it. My neighbor needs health care. If we lose that, 27 rural hospitals in the state of Idaho are gone. Because mine over in Gooding would be gone. Because that's how when somebody comes in and needs health care, that's the doctor's job. If they can't pay, it goes into Medicaid, Medicare, wherever the person is. We've done away with the CAP fund that used to help that. Counties used to be able to apply that. It's gone. What's going to happen to hospital? We've done away with doctors. Have you seen the rate we're losing doctors? How far do you have to travel to find that person to treat you? My daughter-in-law has to travel to Idaho Falls for some of her treatments. Well, okay, let's manage to hope I can afford the gas to get there. What we're doing, we have to look at. It's about our lives. It's how we live every single day. And we have to start taking care of each other and it's not about a letter of the alphabet. And I cried after election when the open primaries went away, because we have so many of our friends that say, oh, gotta vote for an R. No, you don't. It's about people and issues. We need to start having that conversation and making sure that we take care of each other. It's my neighbor. I'm going to talk to him or her. You know what? You've got to look what's going to happen if our right wing does away. We had a legislator in this district, our biggest employer is CSI, vote against their budget. Are you kidding me? That's our employer. That's our neighbors. If you look at and I'll be blunt, if you look at the tariffs, let's talk about the 5 biggest crops Idaho exports. 39% of our export of potatoes goes to Mexico and Canada. 49%. Potato farmers. Oh, they don't matter? Let's have the driver of our economy. And then let's talk about the alfalfa that goes to Japan. Those are our neighbors. And we have to start making that message heard. Don't care about D's and R's. We have to take care of each other. And that conversation has to be loud and clear. More so than just, I talked to a lady when they were complaining about the work requirements. I was on the golf course, by the way. And we took a cart and we were with our kids and she says, oh, they need work requirements. And I says, really? Do you know that mother that is going to take that waitressing job? She has 2 little kids at home. She can't make enough on her wages to pay a babysitter all day long to take care of her kids. Plus now she has to pay a food bill for 3 people, the 2 kids plus the babysitter. She doesn't make enough money to even pay the rent or the gallon of milk. It's better that she gets a little bit of help until those kids get in school. And besides, I need her. And she goes, I'm glad I talked to you. I didn't realize that. We have to start having those conversations with the facts. Luke talked about the vouchers. We have 18,000 kids that go to private schools. We have 300,000 kids that go to public schools. And we put a 50 million cap is going to go by the wayside. Already, the fiscal note for that bill has doubled. When they passed it, it was $60,000 going to cost the state to manage it. That number is now up to $123,000. And next year, the State Tax Commission figures it'll be $400,000 when they really have to do it. It's going to just, $400 million is going to be a conservative estimate. With that,